Before we start today's roundtable, I want to give special thanks to Checkster, our group sponsor. Checkster has become well known in the recruiting industry by providing a platform that easily captures reference checks in the hiring process. I myself have been a customer of theirs for years. I use a reference checking tool for all of my new hires. However, Checkster has now released a new product suite called Insights. This new product suite is really what has excited me to have Checkster as the group sponsor. With Insights, the Checkster platform now covers employees from cradle to grave and not just reference checking, starting when they apply, going to offer, through onboarding, then covering their work at your company, and then to the end with exit interviews. It's an easy to use, easy to understand way of giving and getting feedback from your peers. Checkster's simple goal, to build more productive and passionate teams. Now, if this concept of getting insights from your peers regarding your work sounds familiar, it should, because that's the simple goal of this group. Connecting, communicating, collaborating. Support me, support the group. Follow the link below, recruiting.org/Checkster. This will take you to a landing page to sign up for a quick demo. If you are just thinking about automating your reference checking process, it'll be well worth your time. But I encourage you to check out the full Insights suite. I'd love to find out if you feel the way I feel about it. Now let's get to today's roundtable. All right, let's jump right into it. Thank you everybody for attending episode 56 and Let's Talk Recruiting, where TA peer practitioners get together and talk about various topics that we all have come across our desk on a daily basis. So let's jump into today's topic, which is 5 metrics every recruiting team should have. With us today, we have Kathy Berry out of Chicago, Eddie Stewart out of Philly, Courtney Lewis out of Atlanta, and Lisa Rezel also out of Chicago. And I'm, of course, I'm out of the LA area. Metrics is a big passion of mine. I'm a recruiting operations guy, so I'm all about the numbers from soup to nuts, going from sourcing numbers to exit interview numbers. So I love knowing what's going on in programs and helping companies know what's going on in their program. So today we're going to kind of do a roundtable, go through each panelist, have them cover off kind of what they think are the key metrics, and then we'll take it from there. So with that said, Kathy, I am going to start with you. Do you want to cover your item?
Sure. So if anybody has ever worked for Fortune 500 companies, large and small, they're going to be meter monitored and measured in some way, shape, or form. So over the course of my 25 years in recruiting, I think I've been held to almost every metric known to man, from time to fill to retention, in addition to a variety of other things along the way. But for purposes of this discussion this morning, I wanted to focus on my particular favorite metric, and that would be the sourcing time, specifically to fill a requisition. I feel that your recruiting team is only as good as your sourcing ability when it comes to the talent that you have on your team. So I really like to measure that at every organization and every position that I personally recruit for, whether my company measures on it or not. And so how I measure that is specifically, it's the time. It's actually calculated after the position is filled. So it's a little bit different than other metrics that are out there, but it's the time that you open the requisition to the time that the chosen candidate was presented to your hiring manager, the actual candidate that was hired. And that is how I calculate sourcing time. So I'm always trying to better myself. I'm always trying to find avenues of recruiting, avenues of sourcing that will benefit the roles that I'm recruiting for. So I look at that constantly on a quarterly basis, and I take my average. So I've been able to consistently stay at below 30 days in terms of that sourcing time, oftentimes, sometimes less. So what that gauges and what that tells me is, am I fishing where the fish are? Am I going to the sources that are going to most benefit the roles that I have open? Am I spending my money in the right places? Am I working that budget to the best ability and squeezing blood out of a turnip, so to speak? I don't want to be wasting my money and spending time in sources that aren't going to benefit me. So if I don't have a sourcing time of 30 days or less, I'm starting to critique exactly where I'm going and what I'm looking at and the sources that I'm using to find those candidates. So it sometimes takes a little bit of time if you start a new company, because you want to try to find and play with some different things until you find what works for you. But eventually, 3 to 6 months into it, I should be having that sourcing time of 30 days or less.
Now, Kathy,
So,
do you look at like different roles for different sourcing times?
I do. So currently I'm working in a medical billing capacity. So my roles are more similar to each other than they were at other companies, because I'm recruiting for one business group. Where if I was recruiting for a more vast, different types of roles from accounting to IT, it's going to look completely different. And I would calculate those numbers based on the business unit themselves. Does that make sense?
Yep. Yeah, and that can be done with not just within company, or not within industries, but within the companies, right? It may take longer for an IT developer versus a marketing person or what have you, and management level.
Absolutely, because supply and demand really play into that as well. What's the unemployment rate look like? What what areas of the country, from your geographic to demographics, are playing into those numbers as well. So it helps when I explain time to find, time to fill to my hiring managers, because there are two different numbers. Time to fill a lot of times doesn't typically measure my talent, because there's background checks, there's onboarding, there's all of these other things that are out of my control that I cannot control. But sourcing time is something that I can control. I own that, because that's what my talent is, and that's what I truly believe. Sourcing is the new recruiting, which I think you had another webinar on that as well.
Yeah, it's a differentiator, in my opinion.
It is.
One sourcing ability between an applicant processor to a recruiter who recruits. That's how I sort of look at it. But sort of on that note, so let me ask you this. For a rec that gets filled with somebody who applied, right? They saw the job posting, they applied, they end up getting the job. We're still tracking time to source?
Absolutely. Because I'm spending money. For instance, if it's Indeed, I can source on Indeed, I can post on Indeed. So I'm spending money with Indeed. So I'm going to track that. If they apply or if I source, I'm absolutely going to track that and look at those numbers at the end of every fiscal quarter to see where my money is being spent, where it's being spent the most. Am I finding those folks on Indeed within 30 days, or are they applying to a posting? So you can spin those numbers and pull whatever you'd like.
So when you've gone to a new company and you implement this metric, have people heard of this before? Or they kind of, what is it? Or how has that been the process?
It's interesting because there's one company that I worked at that measured this to a T. They used Taleo, and they had purchased every module of Taleo. And I was held to 10 different metrics at this Fortune 500 company, and this was one of them. And when I became a manager, it's something that I really looked at to gauge the talent on my team, is that sourcing time. So a lot of places that I go right now have never heard of it. Which shocks me, because that is where you're spending your money. So it does shock me, but I have talked to a lot of people that have never heard of that before. And to me, it really gauges the talent of your recruiting team.
So to the rest of the panel, have you ever used that metric or come across it, or thoughts on it in general?
I was just putting in the chat, I have not. I like this idea, to Kathy's point, about better gauging your success as a member of the talent acquisition team versus time to fill. We've had a lot of talk about whether or not that's it's a good metric. What is it really gauging? So I would love to start implementing that at our company. I think it's great.
Yeah, this is Eddie Stewart, Radius Health, small pharmaceutical company out of Philadelphia. One of the things that we implemented was to, instead of taking time to fill, take time to the next spot in your recruiting process. So all applicant tracking systems can show you when the person applied, when the recruiter talked to them, when we present them to the hiring manager. And if you look at those individual steps in your process, you'll find that some the hiring manager owns and some the recruiter owns, some like background checks an outside vendor may own. And I've found really interesting to show hiring managers how long they're taking in the recruiting process versus the recruiter or an outside vendor. It's enlightening to show that, you know, you wanted your position to fill longer, but you went on vacation 2 weeks, and that added 2 weeks to the time to fill, but it wasn't my 2 weeks, it was your 2 weeks. And you can have interesting conversations if you track as the candidates move through each process.
And Eddie, what ATS do you use there that you're referring to?
We use iSIMS.
Yeah. And Kathy, are you tracking your numbers in your ATS or is it outside?
We use Greenhouse, and Greenhouse has some limitations in terms of reporting. I don't know if anybody on the panel uses Greenhouse. So I am actually measuring that manually right now. We're hoping to be able to roll out some of those measurements within Greenhouse down the road. But we are still developing our TA team and building that infrastructure here at iRhythm. We've grown substantially from a team of 5 to a team of 25 within 1 year. So it's been insane growth. So we're a little behind in building out that infrastructure, but we're getting there.
I will say if the applicant tracking system doesn't do that, like you can get a close estimate if you just kind of monitor from the time the hiring manager says, I want to interview someone, to the time a decision's been made, because that's where all of the hiring manager time is used, is this process of delaying decisions to move to the next step, delaying decisions to hire, or I want to see just one more candidate before I make a decision. So if your system doesn't do that, you may do a thumbnail estimate to get an idea of how long the hiring manager has the candidate on their side.
I found
I'm a firm believer too that time to fill should be measured from the date the requisition is open to the date the candidate accepts. I know some organizations measure time to fill as when they pass background or when the candidate actually physically starts on their very start date. And I just don't think that's an accurate measurement of time to fill. I think those should be measured separately, but that's my own opinion. So,
I'm with you on that, Kathy. Time to fill versus time to start, like the day they start,
yes.
two different numbers. I've found in recent years, like going back some years, a lot of systems did not kind of timestamp when you move from one stage to another. They could just tell you what the current funnel statuses were. So when you wanted to go look back on the progression and how quick are you to do it, it just wasn't there. With that said, I think a lot of systems now kind of do that time stamping, so you can pull those reports and what I call days sat, right? How long did you sit in a certain stage, like from time to submit, to your point, Kathy, from time to submit to time to on-site interview. Well, that's not our control. Back to Eddie's point, well, it's
Exactly.
dependent upon the hiring manager's calendar availability. All right, excellent. Thank you, Kathy, very much. That is I've never tracked that one, but I like it, so I'm going to start looking at it. And I've sort of tracked time to slate. So like, how long does it take you to get 3 submittals? I've gone by that. Let's say it's 3. That magic number is the date that the 3rd person was submitted. You got your slate if you're doing slate submits. But anyways, Eddie, can we jump over to you and your item?
Yeah. So I'm all for like time to fill, common metric that most people track, but then seeing how you can get more out of it. And another area in that regard is the source of hire. The one thing that I think is great now that was a challenge, 15 years ago, is getting better source of hire information, where the candidates are coming from, especially when they start in one place, funnel through another place, and end up on your website. But what I've found is I get a lot more insight if I track source of hire and source of applicant. And as an example, you may have a source, let's say LinkedIn provides the highest volume of hires for you. The source of applicants may help to clarify that. Do they also have the highest number of applicants versus a company that, you know, fills 5 roles a year, or a venue that does 5 roles a year, and the number of applicants is 7, then I want to dig a little deeper. Why are we having so much success there? And can we magnify that? Versus, you know, we look at source of hire and say, well, we didn't get a lot of hires there, so let's move on. But there might be another story behind that. That source of applicants helps to describe and helps to funnel resources and, you know, to the most successful ways to find candidates rather than just the highest volume.
Yeah, sort of on top of that, Eddie, I've used, I track the source of applicants just to see where everything's are coming, but I also look at source of interviews. So to me, like that on-site interview was like quality. So I would always track source of hire, source of interviews, and source of applicants to get on that. But to your point, the source of applicants, I don't know if you've ever had managers that you work in an industry where there's some niche job boards specific to that industry, and it has to be on there. That job has to be on that spot, but clearly you don't get any return of qualified applicants coming through. Not high quality, not high quantity, but it has to be up there. So to your point about that, knowing, hey, where did we get our applicants from? It's kind of important.
I would say for me, I use the source of hire a little. I like to use it so that, for instance, I'm a high volume recruitment. So I like, in one of the main things is making sure I'm able to fill roles quickly. So I like to use it as a source to say, okay, certain positions, I know I can go here and get position filled a whole lot faster than if I go over here. So it also allows me to understand where it is I need to go for that quick. Like if I know that I can get more applicants on Indeed, I'm gonna hurry up and put it on Indeed because I can get more people from Indeed. If I see that I'm getting more people from LinkedIn for this type of position, then I'm run and hurry up and put it on LinkedIn. Because again, I'm that high volume. I don't have a lot of time to, okay, let me see if I can put it over here, 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 and here, and then wait for people to start. Nope, I need to make sure I'm getting the most effective sourcing. So that's kind of where I use my source to hire from.
Sort of along those lines, from working a recruiter's desk trying to fill racks, from that perspective, when you're going through applicants, are you understanding that time is of the essence? Nobody has enough time in the day, so we got to prioritize what you do during your day. Are you looking at the applicant source to kind of go back, hey, I get the best quality from this area, so I'm always making sure that I review those applicants and don't leave those applicants hanging? Are we using that as a time management tool?
I use it for both because my applicant, so with us, our Indeed, if they go through Indeed, they automatically get sent over to our website. So we end up having conversations with them through our website. So it just really depends.
Any other panelists, thoughts on that? Are we using that for time management?
I mean, you know, in a day, right, as you say, you only have so many hours, and I would say if I see a referral come in, right, I'm going to that person first. I think most of us probably would. Some of the job boards that, you know, may yield more, I guess you could say, just a candidate that I know might not match as well, then that will probably come later. But I do think it's a good way to prioritize, especially if you post a position and you have, you know, 100 applicants. It's a lot to get through in a period of time, right? So I think it can be a good way.
Eddie, have you ever ran paid, I don't know, paid posting is the right, highlighted posting, like on LinkedIn, you could run a campaign for a specific job. Do you ever drill down and track source of applicants when you're doing like a paid directed effort, which it's not cheap, right? So it's like, it's costly. So you want to see if you get a return?
Yeah, because often we don't have a big recruiting budget. So I'll go to the business and say, if you really want maximum exposure, pay some extra money and we'll, you know, run a campaign or do something different. So I do gather those numbers. LinkedIn has a lot of good data, right, when you run a campaign. And there's some other, we use a service called Job Target for compliance reasons, but they also have like an advertising piece where they'll post positions, places, they'll keep track of how many clicks, how many people applied. And that information we use as recruiters, but I try to take it back to the business as well to show them. To your point earlier, people are saying we have to post on this site, or I don't want to post on that site. But when you take metrics back and say, hey, we're not getting the number of applicants right now, but you're getting tons of clicks. It's just a matter of time before we get some good people to move through. So that if you can take that information back to the business and build business cases for things, it's helpful.
So are you a fan of those paid promotions? And the reason why I ask is I haven't tried it a lot, but when I did try it, I didn't get anything for return on my money.
We use LinkedIn maybe twice a year. And if it costs, I mean, LinkedIn can get expensive, right? It adds up fast. So we put limits on things, and we try to have check-ins with them so that we know where the money's spent. We both times last year, the main goal was marketing branding exposure, and hopefully have some candidates come from that. So in that regard, for an example, we had a specific pharma functional group just in the Boston area. So we wanted to get the Radius name out, and at the same time, we got a few candidates, so we consider that successful. I like Job Target because we pay for the compliance piece, and then as a spillover, we get this extra advertising piece, and there's a lot of good metrics, and you don't have to keep track of where your job's posted. They move it around by some kind of algorithm that they use.
When people apply when using Job Target, do you see that they come from Job Target and the specific source that they came kind of like a subset?
Yeah. It shows you all the steps, right? So if someone went to Job Target and then they decided to apply through LinkedIn, it will show those. Now, it does get a little messy. I saw one of the people post that its source of hire or source of applicant sometimes is not accurate in the applicant tracking system, and that's correct. Like sometimes we get 3 or 4 or 5 different LinkedIn sources, but we have to just manually clean it up, and we can still make sense of the data. But it shows you the whole travels of the applicant and how they made it to your website.
Yeah, whenever I've done my type of reporting, I always do different viewpoints looking at the data. So like job role, where do I get the best people for this job role? Then I look at management level. Those are probably the 2 most important ones, which is a source for entry level or individual contributor positions may not be my best source for directors in finance or legal or something like that. So I always look at that little subset from it. Most ATSs track that metadata on the rec to give that viewpoint in it. So I just kind of look at it from, no recs are apples to apples, right? They're on their own little story for the most part, but you can bucket when you can. Management level, job role, and location is always sort of ones that I like to look at for it. All right, excellent. Anybody want to add anything to Eddie's topic? All right, Courtney?
Real quick, Eddie, can you share on the chat that job target information? That'd be great.
Is it just jobtarget.com? Is it that simple?
Oh, is it? Oh, okay.
I don't know.
You're on mute, Eddie.
Sorry, I'm on mute. I can put a contact name if you're interested. I can look that up while we're talking here and put that on the chat.
Yeah, they're a good vendor. They've been around for years. I can't remember the CEO's name. I think it was short, high energy guy. He used to be at the conferences a lot, but their product is good. All right, Courtney, let's jump over to you.
All right. So for me, I have on top of other metrics that I use, but 2 of the main ones that I like to use is one is the candidate experience conversion rating, also the retention/turnover rating, because it's kind of, they tie into both. The first one I'll talk about is the turnover rating. So of course, everybody knows turnover rating, which is your number of terms against your number of employees that you have in the company. But for me, I like to really look at it as what contributes to those ratings. I like to look at it by position if I can. If not, I like to make sure I look at the reasons why we're having these, especially if I have a high turnover. I like to look at why it is that I'm having a high turnover, especially when I'm going into my strategy meetings and talking with my HR managers or having conversations with the C-level. I like to make sure I know why we're having those so that we can actually cut down on me having to continue to fill roles. Also to make sure that I know how to promote my roles, especially when it comes down to retending, so that I can say, okay, why are these people staying in the roles that they're staying in, and then why are these people leaving the role? So if these people are staying in the role because, oh, you know, it's great training in this, then when I get ready to promote this role the next time, I can easily say, hey, with this role, it comes with great training. It comes with great, you know, this, that, and the third. So I definitely look at my turnover rating a little bit different from most people. But if I can get it on a monthly basis or year to date, great. But I like to know what contributes to it. As far as the turnover. And then as far as the candidate experience, the main things I like to look at is, again, what contributes to the candidate experience. Of course, it's from your time the candidate applied to when they either start or reject. Although I know there are some things that are in there that are against our controls. They like the background. But there are things that are within our control during the background, which is following up with that candidate. Letting that candidate know, hey, we're still waiting on your background, but here's, you know, what you can start thinking about as we're waiting. Also, again, if the candidate is not going to be a candidate that we're going to use, I like to make sure that I let them know. And so for me, I like to consistently look at that when I'm looking at my metrics, saying, Courtney, how long does it take you to let the candidate know that they're not going to be in this process? Because the last thing you want is somebody waiting forever to know that they're not going to be part of the process anymore, or have someone to, you know, be in the process for a long time from the time they start, from the time they apply to the time they start, you end up losing candidates. So the main thing is making sure to be able to shorten that process. And the only way you can shorten that process is definitely by looking at how long it's taking you to do it. I know I said a lot, I'm sorry.
So I'll add something to kind of what I commented on Kathy's point before about a different differentiator between recruiters from one level in their career to the next. Kind of to Courtney's point, I love knowing and seeing recruiters that love to know it too, is that exit interview or the exit reasons. Because to me, if you go into a discovery meeting with a manager and you know why people are exiting their team or the company, that just shows you're not the processor. You're in, going back to my numbers, soup to nuts, from cradle to grave. If you know why people are leaving, that can help you address your recruiting the candidates. Then, Courtney, kind of to your point, to sell a position, if people are leaving because they're getting great training and they're going out and up, right? They're leaving the company because they're getting a promotion elsewhere because there's no room to move at their current company. I'm selling that to every candidate I talk to, right?
Mm-hmm.
To your point about the training opportunities. But just having, I know HRS systems, they'll track exits, or they'll terminate, right? They'll say, was it regrettable or non-regrettable? Hopefully your systems track that. Not all do. Some that do don't always get the data populated. But to know that type of information, you can request that from your HRIT team. Hey, I need a term report every month. Here are the departments that I support. These are the departments I need. And you can start to see who's leaving. If you want to know where they go, you know, wait 4 weeks, go on LinkedIn. They probably updated the profile, so you can start to see that. Are they going out and up? That's probably the only way to get that, unless you do some type of exit interview survey, which I highly encourage. But any comments from the panel about that? So kind of exit interviews is kind of outside the typical recruiting realm, but I love to see it including, because it is, retention is still part of recruiting, even though I know it's not really, but I do think it is. It's part
That's
of
a whole topic in itself, Sean. You need to have a.
We're getting there. We're getting there.
Pretending is definitely part of the recruiting. One of the things that I've learned as a recruiter is, even though we do not always get a chance to sit in those exit interviews, we're privy to a lot of information that a lot of the company is not, because we are the first people that people know. So a lot of times if they're not happy, we are the ones that they contact. We know why they are not happy. We know why they're leaving, even though other people may not know. And that's one of the best things about being the recruiter is you know all the gossip, you know everything that's going on. And some of the things are not things that are being tracked by systems. They're not things that are being tracked by, you know, the exit interviews, because again, they don't want to tell everything in the exit interviews, but somehow, some way, they're willing to tell us. So we get all of the information that others do not.
I have well, as you guys have known, I have pretty strong beliefs on a lot of the things in recruiting, which I think maybe that's why I'm a panelist so often. But I I have a pretty strong belief in retention metric. So that retention metric is not owned solely by the recruiter. It just really isn't. And I firmly believe that a recruiter should really only be responsible for retention within the first 30 days. I am not in charge of that department or that business unit's training, or the culture that's within that business unit. My role is to bring those folks on board, give them the best experience possible, but I can't control retention after 30 days. I mean, it is out of my hands at that point. If somebody terms in the first 30 days, that's when I will look at it and say, okay, we have done something differently. But as a recruiter, I'm not the final decision maker on that candidate, and nor can I control that retention after they've been onboarded and in their department. That is where the hiring manager kind of takes charge and takes that individual and develops them. So I feel pretty passionately about that because it's just out of my control at that point.
Does it matter the definition of the term if the employee leaves or the employee gets fired in those first 30 days?
Well, I think it's important that we look at what caused that, but within that first 30 days, a lot of companies, they point the blame at somebody within their first 30 days if it happens, right? So I think it's important that we sit down with our hiring managers and say, let's look at exactly what happened here. Where could we have done better as a recruiting team, but what could you have done better onboarding this person after they've, gone through orientation and are settled in their department? So joint responsibility, but after 30 days, and if you're a good recruiter, you're following up with those folks, their first 30 days to make sure they're settling in okay. I think it's out of our hands at that point. So
yeah, just thinking broadly,
HR's right? It's more of an HR piece, right, after that. So I'm a firm believer in that.
I think it's one of those things that, although, no, do not hold me to that metric after the 30 days, but it's definitely something I need to definitely look at over time. Whether somebody's in their 30 days, 60, 90, 10 years, I need to be looking at it because as a recruiter, it's important for me to know why people are staying with the company, especially when are the one who's speaking for the company. We're the face and we're the voice of the company when it comes to recruitment. So for me, do not hold me to that metric after a certain amount of time, but it's definitely a metric that I need to be viewing over time. I think that's kind of how I look at retention reporting.
Well, and I agree to some of those points, right? Because we want referrals. Referrals are usually, they have a long retention time. People, work with people that people want to work with people that they love working with. So I think referrals are huge, and I think it attests to that. I think a company can look at their referral percentage as source of candidate, and it's very indicative of how that engagement is throughout your organization. But I don't necessarily think that's part of the recruiting process, so to speak. So, we can agree to a certain point on that, but I can't take responsibility of that candidate after they've been here for X amount of days. I just can't. So
either way, the rec's coming back on your desk.
Yeah. Well, and that's when, and if that continues to happen, that's when you've got to take the time out, involve your HR business partner and say, what's going on in this business unit where we can't retain people? And I can't, as a recruiter, I can't take on that level of responsibility. I can take in it to a certain degree and I can bring it to an HR business partner's attention, but I can't solve that problem while I'm trying to recruit 25 other positions as well. So I truly believe that I can be a part of that. I can raise the red flag, but I can't necessarily solve that problem.
So interestingly, probably like 5 months ago, a the recruiting function was asked to do the exit interviews to help out. Most enlightening thing that it's a fun job, by the way. I'm all in hearing why people want to leave, but it's interesting. Like if you think about all the people that are leaving your company, most of them, almost all of them, are leaving for reasons that just naturally happen. People find better jobs, or they don't get along with their manager, which happens, and none of that is recruiting related. But if you do have access to exit interview information, there's a lot of good nuggets in there, right? Training, some physical things that would cause someone to have a harder time to do their job, right? A commute or something where you can start gathering themes. And I think if we on talent acquisition worry less about every single reason why someone leaves and focus on change, like what can we change, then we can have a greater impact.
Yeah, I agree. Especially for the quick departures. It's almost, and I kind of joke, hey, that Rex coming back to your desk, I'm kind of serious about it. Because if it is a quick departure and then you repost and you try and recruit those same candidates, if I'm one of those candidates, like, oh, I thought this was filled, it's open again. What happened? Right, that's that tough conversation to have around that. All right. Excellent. I've never seen, one last point on this, we'll jump, Lisa, to you. I've never seen a correlation, I don't know if there is one, between, according to your point about candidate experience and measuring positive candidate experience as it relates to early departures. Like if somebody had kind of a poor experience or delays, managers canceling interviews, and I've seen candidates fly in for an interview, be in the hallway, and the manager cancels it because they had to go to another meeting. So if you have a poor or bad experience, but you still take the job, are you out of there in 30 days because your patience is gone? Okay, that's the final straw. Versus, I had a good candidate experience, I'm having some issues with the manager, but I'll work through it. I have no idea if there's a correlation between those two. Love to see it. Anybody has it?
I've seen it both ways, where I've had a person who had a great experience, and then once they got hired, it was just like, okay, what happened? And then I had someone who, the manager kept canceling the interviews, and then once they were in, they were excited about being with the company. So I've actually seen it both ways, and I've seen them correlate, where it was just like, look, I had a poor experience, but now that I'm here, I love it. So, I mean, they can correlate definitely. It's just really how you want to look at it, to be perfectly honest. But it's definitely great feedback to have when you get ready to go for the next set of interviews or next set of requisitions.
I love to see new hire surveys that ask, did you have a computer at your desk on your first day? It seems like a no-brainer, but it's a very important piece, because if I show up, I can't really do anything for a week because I don't have any systems. My experience has gone down. Anyways. All right, Lisa, let's jump over to you.
Yes, sounds good. So some of you may know me. I think I've spoken to some of you on this panel before. I am in Chicago, and I work with a mid-sized consulting company. So one of my big aha moments when I joined, company's name is Centric Consulting, was just the importance of top of the funnel metrics from a recruiting and sourcing perspective at a couple key stages in the process. I mean, at a minimum, just knowing this is helpful if it's just you, or maybe if you have a team of sourcers or other recruiters that you're managing, but just knowing and having a touch point visibility into how many messages you might be sending and how many people you're actually connecting with. And depending on your ATS, that can be really difficult to track. For us, we use Taleo Business Edition. They provide very limited insight into any messages you're sending out at all, and then how many you're getting replies to or acceptances to. So most of us probably know LinkedIn provides this data, as well as a couple other tools. But I mean, this has been really important for our team for a couple reasons. Number one, if you get messages outbound and then you're looking at the acceptance rates, it can really help with evaluating the messaging and if it's effective in getting your candidate's attention. And we know how important that is. And then second, I think we were talking a little bit before about those expectation meetings with hiring managers that you might have, weekly or every other week to let them know where you stand on a search. I think this data has been helpful for us in those meetings too. Let's say you're reaching out to, 50 people in a week and you got 3 responses. Well, maybe you want to offer up the send on behalf of option to maybe engage hiring managers in the process, or have them, if you don't have that option, just send messages out to candidates that you've sourced. So it's really helped us a lot more, top of the funnel, especially if a lot of us on this call are in high volume environments, or you're recruiting in a skill set where you have to send like twice as many messages out to get a response. So, initially when I came in, we didn't have a lot of visibility into that. Been hard to track. I'm still working on it, but it's been super, I think, key for us to know where we stand and tweak along the way.
Yeah, Lisa, along those lines, I used to support sourcing teams, right, at large size companies. And one of the key metrics is exactly what you're kind of describing. We call it lead conversion, right? So we would use CRMs, and CRMs, you don't have applicants, but you have leads and contacts. Leads are people we don't know. Contacts are people we do know. You identify your leads, the people that you want to talk to about your rec that you're trying to fill. You basically build out your list. In CRM world, it's CRM. In LinkedIn, it's a project folder, right? You put people in there. And then as a recruiter, and this goes back to earlier pieces about distinguishing your performance level, how well can you convert? And it's just like a basic metric. If I had 25 people on my list and I converted 20 people, what's that, 80%, right? So I have an 80% conversion rate. I think it's 80. But that conversion, the ability to convert people we don't know into people we do know was like, oh, you could really tell a good sourcer can find people out there. A great sourcer can find and convert them. And so what's their messaging like? And that's why I'd get into conversations with corporate recruiters who never cold called, and they would say, well, I just called them. What do I say? I'm like, oh no, I'm a systems guy. I'm not here to spend all my time teaching recruiting. But that was like a key metric, the ability to identify and the ability to convert. So we would do that. And then kind of getting back to your metric of once you have them in your system, like ATSs make it hard because it's really for applicants, not pre-applicants. So we would look at not just your conversion, but just the creation of conversations. So in the CRM world, we call them opportunities. You can call it whatever you want. But if we already have you in your system, we already know each other, and I reach out to you about this new rec, just if we have a conversation, I'm a good recruiter, I'm getting you to have that conversation. Even if you say no, that's a bonus on my side, right? I got you to converse with me. So we would track that as an opportunity created, candidate declined, here's why. And we would track it like that. So it was a combination of lead conversion and then opportunities created. So it combines people you do know and people you don't know. But that, you could tell the sourcers are out there on the phones, in the emails, doing what they need to do to target and engage candidates versus posting the job and processing, which is good. You can get great candidates that way too. But that was like, you could see distinguishing marks within sourcing teams. Like, oh, this person is really good at getting those people, especially if you get into the deeper skill sets or deeper industry. Did quite a few years in biotech, and the ability to convert into conversation in that industry is a highly sought after skill in sourcers. But I love seeing that. And to your point, wow, it's hard to track if you don't have the system for it.
Yes.
But the poor man's version, if you're using LinkedIn, and I'm sure your team already does this, Lisa, just use those folders, and they set the stages in the folder. Just see what you start at, see what you're at. There's your metric track. It's manual, but at least you have an idea of what you're doing. If you're running a team, you see what everybody's doing, but everybody has to agree, hey, when we use LinkedIn, this is how we're going to use it, because then you can compare apples to apples, so to speak.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, and we're able with our version of LinkedIn to have reports created where they'll send you, this is the messages you sent for the last month. This is how many were accepted. And I don't think we have an extremely high partnership with LinkedIn. So I think they should be able to provide that for you. But yeah, I mean, again, you're messaging some people in LinkedIn. It's not covering everything. So you might be doing, poor man's version of tracking even in Excel. And that's kind of what we resorted to as well.
Yeah, I think whatever the numbers you get in LinkedIn, you can probably apply to be generally the same that you do outside. Because yeah, don't spend your time tracking numbers. That's not what you get paid to do. But that's sort of a good version. Hey, are we able to convert? And I always like tracking candidate declines. Well, why don't you want to work here? Oh, this, that, or the other. Oh, okay, good to know. I just want to give a quick example. Back in 2008, the same biotech company, they're only located in San Francisco, so they were doing outbound recruiting. They were getting a lot of declines because people wanted reload because they were underwater in their mortgage, the housing crisis. Well, they blew through their reload budget in the first quarter. So then we started tracking every time somebody said something about, I need reload in order to come work at your company. And these are sought after talent. They tracked everybody, the person's title, the person's company, the fact that they need a reload, and they went back and got budget. So it's not just about tracking recruiter performance. It's just kind of, Eddie, to your point, to getting this information. It's just decision-making information, and great if you need to go ask for budget. Because when you can name names with hiring teams, this person at this company who you want to work here said no because it's just great ammunition, so to speak.
That's a great point.
How about anybody else? Are you kind of tracking, Kathy? It sounds like you do a lot of sourcing. Are you tracking conversion or anything like that?
So here at iRhythm, no, we are not tracking that yet. We're still very young in terms of metrics implementation. But I've done it heavily at other companies, but not specifically where I'm at right now. I wanted to call out Stephen in the chat, made a comment about candidate surveys and engagement, in terms of retention. So he actually made a really great comment in there about, sending out those candidate surveys to kind of determine that engagement and tracking your retention over time. Courtney, it was really interesting. So I don't know, Courtney, at your company, do you do those surveys at 30, 60, 90 days? Do you do any of that there? I know we do for them.
I know our HR managers reach out to the employees at their 30, 60, 90 to see how everything is going on. I don't think that they have an actual survey that they do, but they do kind of have a sit down with each of the individuals as they are coming in, and also have the manager to have a sit down to see how their experience is. Just to kind of keep up with what's going on. That's definitely what they try to do for retending and doing things like that, but no survey.
When it comes to surveys, being the operations guy, highly encourage those surveys be associated to hiring managers and departments, so you can start to gather, because otherwise it's anecdotal stories. You can only do so much with anecdotal stories.
Yes.
Once you start to get information over time, you can start to see the trends and, what's really going on here, good or bad, to be in there.
It is interesting to see a candidate at their engagement at 30 days versus their engagement at 90 days. So, in terms of that, even though I only feel responsible within their first 30 days, it's interesting to see, where they are as a newbie versus where they are in 90 days. Are they more engaged with their company or are they not? It's a metric I think that a lot of companies should look at and at least share with the recruiting team so that we know, we can paint a more realistic picture to that candidate up front.
Right.
Then after.
Right.
So I have I know the title was 5 metrics. So I have my metric that I want to add to the conversation. I won't make it long. I'm a big believer, and I'm sure people track it, but I've never seen it other than me, but I'm sure they're out there. I love to track unreviewed rates. This comes back to candidate experience. So I look at, and Eddie, to your point about applicant tracking at the top of the funnel, right? So I look by recruiter and then by rec. So, because you want to highlight some recs over others, but I track the unreviewed percentage on a week-by-week basis so you can start to see it average out. Unreviewed applicants, meaning the recruiter has not had a chance to review them in either yay or nay. We're moving forward or I'm rejecting you. And typically the rates are astonishing to me. So whenever when an employee or somebody who's out there applying to a job and they found out I'm in recruiting, hey, why is this? Why is that? Why don't people call me back? What the black hole, the resumes. my point is, well, don't get flustered because they'll be like, I can do that job. I'm like, well, they probably didn't. There's a good chance they didn't even look at your resume. So don't get too flustered about it. It's a numbers game, it seems, when you apply to jobs. But anyways, I've seen 60%, 70%, 80% on the regular. But when teams focus and they get down to 10% or below, the decrease in time to fill goes down by 2 weeks. The candidate submit time goes down. So clearing out your top of funnel, and I know all recruiters would do it if they had time. I know that's basically the issue. But if you make the time or you focus on your high priority recs, like a high volume rec, and you probably don't got to review everybody if it's a lesser skilled, but senior individual contributor and above or director and above for sure, that should never be above 5% unreviewed. And once you make a point of hitting those numbers and getting them low, the rest of the funnel just gets tighter and quicker. So it's like stop the bleeding artery, and that bleeding artery is unreviewed resumes at the top. Has anybody looked at that number or ever tracked that number? Lisa, you're nodding.
Yes, and I wish that we had just we did record this. Yeah, I'd like to share what you just said, with some folks on my team, because, I feel that, and sometimes it's a matter of like sharing the importance with other people on your team, right? I mean, it's our brand as recruiters, it's our brand as the company. And like you said, it's just that feeling of, like when you clean up your closet, right? And you automatically feel a little bit more organized that day, or you make your bed. It's just a feeling of being organized. And we do look at that. We actually, one of our recruiting coordinators checks that for us per my request once a week to make sure we're staying, she's kind of the compliance police in that respect. So I love that. And I don't know that everybody does, but I personally do. And we do look at that.
I think we hit on this before, Sean. For me, it's one of those things where I definitely try my best because I'm big on candidate experience. You know how I feel about making sure every candidate has a great experience. Unfortunately, in my field, sometimes it's very hard because I'll post a position today and tomorrow I'll have 200-300 candidates. And it's like, okay, now I need to do some pre-screening questions because there's no way that I'm gonna get through 200-300 resumes today or in a couple of days because I need this position filled as soon as possible. And unfortunately, hiring managers don't want to hear, oh, I had to go through 200-300 applications to get to your candidates. It's one of those things where what I want to hear is how long it's going to take you to get me that person. So I'm very big on, if I'm unable to review your application, the one thing I want to make sure that I do, if I know that I'm not going to be able to get to your application, if I know that I have gotten to my top number of people that I'm going to go through, I want to at least make sure I let you know that, hey, you know what, I greatly appreciate your applying, but as of right now, here's where it stands. Just so that person, I don't like to ghost candidates. So just to make sure that candidate knows, look, unfortunately, it's just not it right now. Come back and more than likely, unfortunately, this position will probably, be back out there at some point, but just not today.
I hear you.
Courtney, I do high volume as well, so I feel your pain. I had 16 openings. I had 16 people start on August 17th, so I had a very crazy time. And I had 1,687 people apply to the 3 different openings that I had. So it was crazy. 80% of that number were associate referrals. So I didn't even get into those requisitions to review even 1% of those individuals because I had so many referrals that were great quality that I hired. So I'm with you on that. Sean, I would fail I would be a terrible.
Hey, high volume, you get a pass, right? Other than outside of that.
I would try, though, Sean. I promise you I would try. I get through about 100, and the most I've done is 150. Look through about 150 in a day. I tried, Sean, but it was just like, you know what? I don't know. I can't.
Do we move the postings when we have those? When we get, like, say, 400 applicants, do you pull down the posting or do you keep it up?
No, I take it down. I'll actually put it on hold. And try to go through as many as I can. And if I see that I'm not able to get enough people or get through those and there's not a great candidate that I want to hire, then I'll open it back up. But once I have a certain amount of people and I know it's going to be overwhelming for me, then I'm like, you know what? No, let me take that down. Let me get through this and then repost if need be.
So I got to a point right now at iRhythm, we're still so fairly new with our applicant tracking systems compared to other larger corporations. I think we've had Greenhouse for only about 5 years out of the 13 years that we've been in business. So for me, I didn't want to turn off that posting because I had 16 individuals that I was starting in August. I've got another 20 individuals that I'm starting between October and November. So I really wanted a pool of candidates that I could go back to and visit. So this time around, I posted the roles for this batch, so to speak. I posted the roles for only 30 days just to see how many I could get, because I'm really trying to build my database of warm candidates that I could go back to and that I could use my own pool of candidates who have expressed interest instead of going and spending money on Indeed or LinkedIn, etc. I'd really like to be able to save money to do that. So I'm trying to build my database of great candidates that I can go to. So right now I haven't shut off those postings because that's what we are trying to build.
Yeah.
But going forward, as we go into 2021, I may not have to post. I may have a nice database of candidates that I can go to who've already expressed interest with iRhythm. So
let me ask this. Once you have those candidates in your pipeline, do you reach back out to them and say, hey, I filled this position at this time.
yes.
However, also hold on to your application, and if something comes open or if it comes back open, do you mind if I use your resume again?
Absolutely. So I have 4 different messages that I send to candidates, in the process along the way. Or yes, it's been reviewed. We have filled all the openings at this point. I think your resume is great. I want to hang on to it for the future. Or, my standard turn down note. So there's 4, I think I have 4 different correspondences that I use along the way. So once I fill that role, I can still go through those resumes, for the next batch. And if they're great, I can still reach out to them and say, you're not being considered for this particular position, but we're having 10 more open, etc. I'm kind of babbling a little bit, but I think you guys get the point of what I'm trying to say.
I'll add one final point for me, kind of to Lisa's point where she talked about her coordinators, the compliance police. Hi, Lisa. If you have a recruiting coordinator that wants to become a recruiter, or you have somebody in campus recruiting who it's not their hot time of the year, what have you, learning how to read resumes quickly and effectively is going back to that skill level in recruiters is such a good skill level to have. Asking that recruiter coordinator to help a recruiter screen resumes, right, and move them from one stage to recruiter review for the good ones and talking with them. Great way to help the team, great way to learn the career that they want to go into. And that's one of those things where I think you only really learn it by doing it, how to screen resumes quickly and reading them. So if you have a coordinator who's got some time, great way to learn and help. All right, we went a full hour. Much appreciation to everybody who's staying on. I'll kind of do a round robin here. Any final thoughts or comments? There's a lot of chat going on. I totally lost track of that. I was in the conversation. Thanks for everybody chatting in there. But
there's a huge chat going on. It was very lively this time. It's been great. So it's hard for me to keep up. I'm trying to read it and talk at the same time. But
yeah, I got to follow you guys along. I can't read. So round robin real quick. Courtney, any final thoughts or comments?
For me, I believe there's so many metrics out there that, each one correlates with the other. Again, that candidate experience would correlate into the quality of candidate. We call it, you're looking at your retention rates, getting your turnover rate so that you're able to definitely get that quality candidate that you're looking for. And just making sure you're using the metrics and just looking at them and saying, how does each thing contribute to the next? And just making sure, reach out to one another and say, hey, what are you using? So that you're able to just pretty much get the best quality candidate and give the best candidate experience as well as employee experience.
Yeah, packaging your recruiting metrics together for an easy to review, easy to understand is a must do, because there can be quite a many. All right, Kathy, final comments or thoughts?
No, I think metrics are really based on the culture of your company and what you're really trying to accomplish in any given year. So I do think that metrics evolve over time based on the goals and objectives that your company is trying to achieve. So what works one year may not work next year, may not work the year after, just how your company is evolving. So I don't think there's any right or wrong answers to metrics. I just think that they have to be aligned with your overall company goals and objectives. So
Yeah, what people care about seems to change.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
always track them, because they'll go back and say, what was this last year? That's why it's, if they're not looking at it, still track it, because somebody's going to come back and ask about it. All right, Eddie, we'll leave the final thoughts and comments to you.
Yeah, I'd say there's a lot of metrics I have to keep because other people tell me to, and they're more important than I am. But when people ask me for ad hoc metrics or ask me for a question like that, I say, why do you want that number? And if you ask that a couple of times, you might be able to provide them the actual real metric that they need and want to use to accomplish something, rather than the common ones that people kind of have heard of.
The shiny new object, the shiny new metric.
Right.
I don't know if when you're referring to people asking, are you referring to people in the business?
Yeah, so I have leaders that say, I want time to fill, I want this, I want that. And you can tell them why they don't need it, but it's a lot easier to give them that stuff. The system can crank out a lot of stuff and give them a bunch of numbers, but then do the real stuff to get the real answers, to get some solutions too.
Yeah, my favorite is when you do an ask for a business leader, and then another business leader sees that and says, oh, I want that too for my department.
Yeah, right.
I mean, tell the story. So it's just really just making sure that every number counts, and what every number tells is what it's supposed to do.
For real.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very much, everybody. I appreciate the time. I thought that was a great conversation. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll talk soon. All right.
Thanks, Sean.
Bye-bye.
Bye.